Yesterday morning I found an envelope on my porch. No stamp. No footprints. Just my name, Robert Walker, written in a hand I hadn't seen in 8 years. My wife's. For a long time I couldn't bring myself to touch it. The ink had faded just a little, like it had been waiting somewhere damp. I ran my thumb over the curve of her R. Same tilt. Same pressure. My heart started doing that uneven thing again, the way it did when she left this world. The porch was quiet except for the rain tapping on the railing, that soft Ohio kind of rain that doesn't hurry. My coffee went cold while I just stared at the thing, half hoping it would vanish if I blinked. When I finally picked it up, my hands shook. The paper was thick cream stock, same kind she used for the letter I burned the night after her funeral. I'd told myself it was mercy. I didn't need reminders. But maybe that was a lie. I opened it slow, careful not to tear. Inside was one sheet folded twice, faintly smelling of lavender. The handwriting hers again. Every loop, every gentle underline. My name at the top. And below it, the same words I'd watched curl into flame. I forgive you, Bob. Please forgive yourself. That's all it said. No date, no return address. Just those 8 words that had once made me drop to my knees beside the riverbank when I thought I'd erased them for good. The radio in the kitchen crackled just then, static, a faint hum of some old country station. I hadn't turned it on in weeks. But there it was, whispering like a memory waking up. I stood in the doorway, letter trembling in my hand, listening. A woman's voice came through the static, soft, half swallowed by the rain. Time heals everything. You just have to let it. I froze. Her voice. Or something close enough to make the air leave my lungs. The old clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had, steady and cruel. I looked back at the letter, now damp from my fingertips. The ink bled slightly, like it was alive again. Maybe it was some prank. Maybe not. But one thing was certain. Something I thought was gone had found its way home. And for the first time in years, I didn't know if I wanted to read it again or burn it all over. I didn't sleep much that night. The letter stayed on the table under the kitchen light like it was watching me. Every time I looked up from my coffee, my eyes landed on those 8 words again. I forgive you, Bob. Please forgive yourself. The sound of them ran loops through my head like the needle of an old record caught in a groove. Outside, the rain hadn't let up, just a soft, steady rhythm tapping against the windows, too gentle to ignore, too constant to rest. Around midnight, I walked out to the garage. That's where I'd burned the first one, 8 years ago. The air still carried a hint of oil and old wood. My truck sat in the corner under a thin film of dust, the same truck she used to call our second home. I remember that night, the fire in the tin barrel, the smell of paper turning to smoke. I'd watched her handwriting twist in the flames. Every word she'd written to me swallowed by heat and regret. I thought that would be the end of it. But standing there again, I could almost see the glow of that fire on the concrete. I swear I heard the faint crackle. Even though the barrel was cold, my hands tingled. Something on the workbench caught my eye. A small brass lighter, the one she'd bought for me when we first started dating. She'd engraved 2 letters on the bottom, RW. I hadn't used it since she passed. But it was sitting there now, polished lid open, a faint scent of lighter fluid in the air. I whispered, "How did you get here?" The garage gave no answer, just the soft creak of the roof under the rain. I picked up. The lighter felt the weight of it. The hinge clicked clean, as the day she gave it to me. My watch ticked steady, louder than I remembered. Every tick seemed to echo her voice. "You have to let it go, Bob. But how do you let go when it comes back to you? When it shows up in your own mailbox, written in the hand of the dead?" I looked at the radio on the shelf. It was one of those old Crosley's, cherry red with a silver dial that hummed when it warmed up. I turned it on. The tubes flickered to life. Static. Then her song, the one she used to hum while cleaning the kitchen, "Blue Moon of Kentucky." It played slow, like from another room. My throat tightened. I reached for the dial, but the signal faded on its own. Silence filled the garage, heavy as guilt. I stood there for a long while, staring at that empty barrel. Then I said out loud, "If you're trying to tell me something, I'm listening." The radio popped once, like it heard me. Then the rain grew louder, and for the first time since she died, I felt the past breathing just inches away. By morning, the rain had turned to a thin mist. The air smelled like wet leaves and old memories. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, but the taste sat bitter in my mouth. The letter was still there on the table edges, curling slightly from the damp air. I'd left it under a small glass bowl overnight, as if that could keep it from disappearing or changing. But the words hadn't shifted. They looked exactly as they had before. "I forgive you, Bob. Please forgive yourself." I ran my finger over the ink again, tracing the loops of her handwriting. My chest tightened. It was impossible. Yet the more I stared, the more I felt it. This quiet certainty that it was her. When my wife Mary passed, I thought I'd buried everything with her, the arguments, the silence, the guilt. Especially the guilt. That night by the river wasn't something I talked about, not even to our son. I poured another cup of coffee, watched the steam rise, and felt the old ache return behind my ribs. Maybe this letter was punishment, or maybe it was mercy. I decided to drive into town, see if the postmaster remembered anything about someone dropping off an unmarked envelope. The old Ford coughed to life, the sound echoing against the garage walls. My hands gripped the wheel a little tighter than usual. Halfway down the road, the radio came alive again without me touching it. The same static hum. Then a woman's voice, soft and tired. "You can't keep carrying that night forever." I slammed the brakes. The road was empty, just the sound of drizzle on the windshield. My watch ticked louder than the rain. I whispered, "What night?" But I already knew. The night I'd stood by the river holding the letter she wrote me. The night before her car went off the road. I hadn't told anyone about that argument. About how I'd thrown her letter in the fire, shouting things I can't even repeat. About how she'd walked out into the rain saying she needed air. They called it an accident. But I'd always wondered if she'd still been angry when she turned that corner. When I reached town, my heart was still pounding. The post office was quiet, just the sound of the ceiling fans spinning slow. Old Harold behind the counter squinted at me. "Morning, Bob. You look like you've seen a ghost." I managed a half smile. "Maybe I have." He chuckled, but when I showed him the envelope, the color drained from his face. He rubbed the edge of it between his fingers. "Funny thing," he said. "Someone dropped off a few letters last week, no postage, no return, all in the same kind of envelope. Said they were from an estate. Didn't catch his name." "His?" I asked. He nodded. "Young guy. Tall. Said he was delivering them for Mary Walker." My coffee turned to acid in my throat. I asked where the man went, but Harold just shrugged. Said he'd be back. Real polite. Quiet type. When I walked back outside, the rain had stopped, but the street still shimmered. Somewhere far off, I heard the faint hum of a radio, same tune, same ghost of her voice. And I started to wonder if forgiveness could travel through more than memory, maybe even through time. The drive home felt longer than usual, like the road had stretched itself out just to think. The mist clung to the windshield, and every mile marker looked older than the last. I kept replaying Harold's words in my head. He said he was delivering them for Mary Walker. It didn't make sense. Mary had been gone for 8 years. There was no estate, no lawyer, no reason for anyone to come looking for me now. Unless someone had found the ashes. Back home, I parked the truck and sat there for a moment, letting the engine tick down into silence. The radio still hummed softly, even though I'd turned the dial off. I reached out, unplugged it completely, but the faint hiss remained. A whisper bled through the static. It wasn't words this time, just a low hum like the first note of a lullaby. The one she used to hum while folding laundry. I whispered into the empty cab, "Mary, is that you?" No answer. Just the slow drip of rain off the gutters. Inside the house, I spread the letter open again under the kitchen light. The ink looked wetter than before, like someone had just written it. For a moment I thought I saw a second line. The last sentence, faint, barely visible. I leaned closer. Then it disappeared. My heart gave a single hard beat that made my hand shake. I turned on the lamp, wiped my glasses, looked again. Nothing. Just those same 8 words. I sat down, elbows on the table, head in my hands. My breath fogged the letter. I remembered the night I burned the first one, the way the smoke rose through the rafters, curling toward the moonlight, spilling through the garage window. I remembered the sound of her car pulling away. The slam of the door. The kind of silence that only comes once you've said something you can't take back. I'd thought I was doing her a favor burning it. That if I destroyed her words, maybe I could destroy the guilt too. But guilt doesn't burn. It lingers in the air, like smoke you can still smell years later. The next morning I drove out to the old river road. The sky was the color of pewter. My boots sank in the mud near the spot where I'd burned her letter years ago. The barrel was still there, half rusted, half swallowed by weeds. I crouched beside it. The ground was soft black with old ash. I dug a little with my hand, the damp earth cool against my skin. A few bits of paper surfaced, fragile gray, unreadable. But one corner still showed ink-faded blue. It was the same handwriting. I sat back hard, my breath catching. My watch ticked louder than the river's current. Then something flashed in the mud, a small piece of brass. I brushed it clean. It was a button from Mary's cardigan, the one she'd worn that night. I closed my fist around it. My throat burned. The wind shifted then, and I swear I heard her voice again, faint and near. "Don't hide from what you already know." I stood there, staring down at that rusted barrel, and realized maybe this wasn't about forgiveness anymore. Maybe it was about confession. I sat on that riverbank longer than I meant to. The mist rolled low across the water, curling around my boots, swallowing the edges of the world. Every sound felt distant, the river's murmur, the soft creak of branches, even my own breath. That button still rested in my palm, cold and heavy. I turned it over between my fingers, remembering how she used to complain that cardigan was too old for church, too soft to throw away. She wore it that last night, the night I told her I didn't believe her anymore. I don't know what I meant by that. Maybe I was angry at her calmness. Maybe I wanted her to yell back, but she didn't. She just looked at me with those tired eyes and said, "You will someday." Then she left. And now, 8 years later, the letter I burned was back in my house. I tucked the button into my pocket, brushed the dirt off my jeans, and started walking back toward the truck. The sky was lifting into pale daylight, that kind of gray-blue that makes you think of ghosts. Halfway there, I saw him, a young man standing by the roadside, hands in his jacket pockets, head down. He looked out of place, too clean, too still for a muddy back road. When he heard my boots crunch, he looked up. Something about him made my stomach tighten. Not fear exactly, something quieter. Recognition, maybe. "Morning," he said. Voice steady, polite. "You're Robert Walker, right?" I nodded. "Who's asking?" He smiled a little, like he'd expected me to say that. "Name's Daniel. I was told to bring you something." He reached into his coat and pulled out another envelope. Same paper. Same handwriting. I didn't move. The river sounded louder now. "Who told you to bring that?" I asked. He looked past me toward the water. "She did." "Who?" He didn't answer right away. Just handed the letter over. His hands were steady, too steady for the chill in the air. When our fingers brushed, I felt something strange, a warmth like standing near a wood stove after too long in the cold. "She said you'd understand," he said quietly. Before I could speak, he turned and started walking up the hill, boots barely making a sound on the wet gravel. "Wait," I called after him. He didn't stop. By the time I reached the bend, he was gone. Just gone. I looked down at the envelope. The handwriting was the same, but the ink was darker, newer. The seal was wax. A small heart pressed into the red. I sat in the truck for a while staring at it. My watch ticked against the steering wheel, marking every second I didn't open it. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside was one line written in that same gentle curve. The fire didn't destroy everything, Bob. Some things you have to face. And under it, faint smudges like fingerprints. Hers. I pressed the paper to my chest. Maybe this wasn't haunting. Maybe it was an invitation. I drove home without the radio on. Didn't even glance at it. The silence inside the cab felt safer somehow, though it wasn't really silent. There was that soft ticking from the dashboard clock, steady as a heartbeat. The second letter lay on the seat beside me. I didn't dare touch it again. My palms still carried the warmth from when that boy Daniel handed it to me. The strangest thing was, I couldn't picture his face anymore. Just that calm tone, that certainty. When he said, "She told me, you'd understand." By the time I reached my driveway, the rain had started again. Fine mist, just enough to blur the world. I sat there a minute, staring at the porch where I'd first found the letter. The boards creaked in the wind same way they did the night Mary walked out. I got out, letter in hand, and climbed the steps slow. The radio inside the kitchen was humming again, though I'd unplugged it. A low frequency like a breath caught between words. I pushed the door open. The letter on the table, the first one, was gone. The bowl still sat there, but the paper had vanished. My throat tightened. Mary. The hum deepened, turned to a faint whisper, almost like a voice through water. I walked closer. The sound was coming from the radio again, the dial glowing faintly blue. "You're almost there, Bob." I froze. The voice wasn't just familiar, it was unmistakable. Hers, where I asked out loud. My voice sounded strange in the room, too alive. The radio hissed, then fell silent. Just the rain tapping the roof. I sat down, both letters in front of me now, the second one in my pocket. The ghost of the first still burned into memory. I unfolded the new one again, reading the line she'd written. "The fire didn't destroy everything, Bob. Some things you have to face." Those words scratched at something buried deep. There was something I'd refused to face for 8 years. Something I'd locked away so tight I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. The crash report had said she lost control on the curve by Miller Bridge. No alcohol. No speed. Just wet roads. But I knew the truth. I hadn't told anyone she'd called me before she left. I'd seen her name flash on the phone. I didn't pick up. The call lasted 22 seconds before disconnecting. That's what the report said. I'd never listened to the voicemail. Until that moment, sitting there in the kitchen, I'd never even opened that folder. My thumb hovered over the old flip phone I kept in a drawer. I'd kept it for no reason, or maybe this reason. I turned it on. The screen flickered, battery nearly dead. The old message icon blinked. I pressed play. Static. Then her voice, faint but steady. "Bob, I'm sorry for leaving angry. I just need to clear my head. Please, don't burn the letter. I meant every word." My chest went tight, breath shallow. The message ended in a long silence, then something else. A soft thump, maybe the steering wheel. Then the sound of rain. 8 years, erased, brought back in 10 seconds. The radio clicked again behind me, that same low hum, turning into the faint melody of her song. And all I could think was she'd tried to come back. I didn't move for a long time after that message ended. The old phone lay on the table, still glowing faintly. Her voice kept replaying in my head, soft as the rain outside. "Please don't burn the letter." But I had. I'd watched her words twist in flame, watched the ink melt into smoke. I told myself it was closure. Truth is, it was fear. My coffee sat untouched. The smell of it had turned bitter. The kitchen light buzzed a dull flicker that made the room feel half alive. I reached for the second letter again, hoping maybe it would make more sense this time. My fingers brushed the paper warm, like it had been sitting in sunlight. I read it once more slow. The fire didn't destroy everything, Bob. Some things you have to face. It wasn't just about the letter. It was about that night. About what came before. I walked out to the garage needing air. The old Crosley radio was there, still plugged in, even though I was sure I'd yanked the cord last night. Its dial glowed faint orange. I turned it off. It stayed on. Then a voice came through. Not her this time. A man's quiet, steady young. "Did you listen to the message, Mr. Walker?" My heart thudded once. "Who is this?" The voice came again, clearer now through static. "She's waiting where you left the fire." Then the signal died. The garage filled with silence thick enough to touch. I turned slowly toward the workbench. The brass lighter lay open again. The flame flickered once, though I hadn't sparked it. Just one quick blue breath of light. I whispered, "Daniel." Nothing. I grabbed my coat. If there was another letter waiting by that river, I wasn't going to sit here wondering. The drive out was shorter this time. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. The road shimmered with puddles from the morning rain. As I neared the bridge, fog hung low, curling around the guardrail. I pulled over and killed the engine. The quiet that followed felt unnatural. No crickets, no wind, just the slow tick of the cooling motor. Then I saw it. A small light glowing near the riverbank, right where the barrel had been. I climbed down the slope, mud tugging at my boots. The closer I got, the brighter it pulsed, soft amber like candlelight trapped in mist. When I reached it, I stopped breathing. It was another envelope standing upright in the wet ground, held by a small stone. The wax seal shimmered gold. I knelt down and brushed rain from its surface. The handwriting gleamed faintly under the glow. My name again, Robert Walker, but beneath it, two smaller words. For Daniel. I froze. My reflection quivered in the water beside it. The same boy who'd handed me the last letter. A cold realization crept through me. Maybe Daniel wasn't the messenger. Maybe he was the message. I looked back toward the road. Through the fog, I could almost make out a figure standing beside my truck, still waiting. And somehow I knew he wasn't alone. The fog thickened until everything looked half erased. I could barely see the truck through the gray veil, just its outline under the bridge light. The figure beside it didn't move. I held the envelope tighter. For Daniel. The words bled slightly from the damp, but they were clear enough to twist my gut. The air smelled of rain and rust. My boots sank deeper into the mud as I climbed the hill. When I reached the road again, the figure was gone. Only the truck-weighted door, still shut, engine off, windshield streaked with mist. I leaned against it, catching my breath. The old watch on my wrist ticked loud enough to sound like thunder in the silence. I wiped my hands on my jacket and looked back toward the river. That faint golden light I'd seen earlier, it was gone too. Nothing left but the slow ripple of water moving past the rocks. I opened the door and sat behind the wheel, letting the rain drum on the roof. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than I remembered. Eyes sunken, mouth trembling slightly. For a moment I thought about driving away, leaving the letter unopened. Pretend it never happened. But I couldn't. Not this time. I tore the seal. Inside was only one small card. No handwriting. Just a photograph. It was Mary, sitting on the porch steps, sunlight spilling over her shoulders. She looked maybe 30. The same soft smile she wore the day we bought this house. But beside her in the picture was someone else. A boy maybe 6 years old. He had my eyes. My throat closed. We never had another child. After she passed, it was just me and our son Jack. But this boy, he wasn't Jack. I could feel it. The photo looked too real, too recent to be coincidence. I flipped it over. On the back, written in the same looping hand, "He came to find you." The words sank through me like a stone. I gripped the steering wheel, staring at the photograph again. The boy's small hand was on Mary's knee. He was looking at the camera but not smiling. Something about his gaze felt familiar. That quiet, steady way of looking right through you. The same way Daniel had. I felt my pulse climbing, the kind of trembling heat that comes right before panic. I shoved the picture into my coat pocket and started the engine. The radio came alive instantly, no tuning, no delay. Just static, rising and falling like breath. Then through the hiss, her voice again, "Don't run this time." I gripped the dial, turned it off, but the voice stayed. It echoed faintly from behind me, from the empty back seat. I turned. Nothing there. Just the seatbelt, swinging slightly as if someone had just been sitting there. The smell of lavender filled the cab. I killed the engine and stepped out into the rain. My legs felt weak. Across the road, near the tree line, I saw movement, a small shape barely visible through the fog. A child standing still, watching me. I blinked, and he was gone. The rain fell harder then, hammering the hood of the truck. The radio popped once more inside, flickered back to life. And through the static came two voices, hers and the boy's, whispering together, soft as prayer. "Come home, Bob. We're waiting." The sound faded into the rhythm of the rain. I stood there under the gray sky, soaked to the bone, and for the first time I said it out loud, "I'm not ready." But the wind carried my words away like it already knew that wasn't true. That night the house didn't feel like mine. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind through the siding felt like someone else moving just out of sight. I left the porch light on, something I hadn't done since Mary passed. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the fog still clung to the yard like it didn't want to leave. The photograph from the letter lay on the kitchen table. I kept glancing at it, half hoping the boy's face would change, half dreading that it might. His eyes followed me wherever I moved. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a chipped glass and sat down across from him. "Who are you?" I whispered. No answer, of course. Just the slow tick of the wall clock. The radio on the counter hummed faintly again. Not a song this time, more like a pulse, a soft rhythm that matched the beat of my heart. I unplugged it, but the sound didn't stop. I closed my eyes, breathing through the ache behind my ribs. My thoughts kept circling back to Daniel. His voice, the warmth of his hand, the look in his eyes, the way he'd said, "She told me you'd understand." I picked up the photograph again, ran my thumb over the edge. There was something written beneath the layer of gloss, faint, like it had been pressed with a pen but never inked. I tilted it under the light. 2 initials, D. My heart stopped for a beat. Daniel Walker. I dropped the photo like it burned. It couldn't be. We'd lost a child once, a miscarriage Mary never talked about again. We'd buried the idea quietly and never named him. She said, some things weren't meant to be. But what if she had named him? I rubbed my hands through my hair, feeling my pulse climb. I wanted to think it was grief, playing tricks again. Same as the rain, same as the radio. But this felt different. This felt deliberate. The phone rang, a sound so sudden it made me flinch. I stared at it. The old rotary one hanging by the kitchen door. It hadn't rung in years. The line had been dead since I canceled it after the funeral. It rang again. My throat went dry. I picked it up. Hello. Static. Then a faint, steady breath. Bob, her voice. Mary, I could barely speak. The breath quickened. Then softly. The line went dead. The silence that followed was heavier than before, like the house itself was holding its breath. The radio clicked once more, a small pop of static, then fell quiet again. I stood there, phone still in hand, until the bourbon glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the tile. The sound snapped something inside me loose. If she wanted me to face this, I would. I grabbed my coat, and the photograph pocketed the letters, and stepped out into the night. The drizzle had turned cold metallic on my skin. The truck started on the first try like it knew where I was going before I did. Back toward the river. Back toward the barrel. Back toward the truth I'd buried. As the headlights cut through the fog, I saw movement again just at the edge of the road. A small figure standing still, watching, and though I couldn't see his face, I knew exactly who it was. The closer I got to the river, the heavier the fog grew, like it was trying to hide what waited ahead. The wipers squeaked slow across the windshield, fighting to keep a clear line through the gray. I drove with one hand on the wheel, the other gripping the photograph. The edges were damp, now soft from sweat and rain. I couldn't stop tracing those faint initials on the back D. W. Every bump in the road felt like a heartbeat. When I turned onto Miller Bridge Road, my headlights caught the guardrail, bent, rusted. The same spot where her car had gone off the edge. My stomach turned over. I pulled to the shoulder and killed the engine. The night fell quiet around me. I sat there a long moment listening to the tick of the cooling motor. Somewhere beneath that sound I could hear the river moving, slow, endless. The watch on my wrist ticked along with it. Same rhythm, same pace. I stepped out, flashlight in hand, and followed the slope down toward the bank. Mud sucked at my boots. The beam of light cut through mist, landing on the barrel half buried by weeds. It looked smaller than I remembered. The air smelled like wet metal and ash. I crouched, shining the beam inside. Nothing but rust and black water pooled at the bottom. Still, something shimmered there, a reflection, faint and shifting. When I leaned closer, the surface rippled. Not from the rain, from movement. A small hand pressed up from beneath the water, pale, blurred like an image on old film. I stumbled back, breath locking in my chest. The light wavered, and the water settled again. The reflection shifted back into my own face. I whispered, "Daniel." The air grew colder. I could see my breath now. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. Then, from behind me, a child's voice, soft, careful. "You shouldn't have burned it, Dad." I turned. He stood near the trees, half hidden by fog. Same boy from the photograph. Barefoot. Jeans rolled up. A small scar across his right cheek. My throat went dry. "Who are you?" He tilted his head, almost smiling. "You know." I shook my head. "That's not possible." He stepped closer, just enough for me to see his eyes, brown, steady, familiar. My own eyes staring back. "You were never supposed to forget," he said. "She tried to tell you." The flashlight slipped from my hand and landed in the mud. The beam swung wild, lighting up the trees and the fog and the river beyond. I dropped to my knees. "What are you?" He looked at me a long moment, then said, "What you could have been if you'd answered the call." The words hit like a blow. My mouth went dry. He took another step forward, and the air around him shimmered faintly like heat above asphalt. I could smell lavender again. "She forgave you," he said quietly. "But you never forgave yourself." Tears blurred my vision. "Mary," I whispered. "She's waiting," he said. "But not where you think." He turned toward the river and started walking into the mist. "Wait," I called out, stumbling after him. "Don't go." The fog swallowed him whole. The water rippled once more, then went still. I fell to my knees at the edge of the river chest, heaving cold, biting through my coat. The only sound left was the rain and the quiet hum of my watch, and somewhere beneath it all the radio's faint static carried on the wind. I stayed there until the rain turned into a thin drizzle, the kind that soaks through without you realizing. My knees were numb from the mud, my hands trembling like the first winter after she died. The river moved slow, patient, like it had all the time in the world to remind me what I'd lost. Somewhere beneath that fog I could still see him, or maybe I just wanted to. The small shape of a boy walking along the edge of something I couldn't cross. I whispered into the mist, "Daniel, please." No answer. Just the quiet lap of water against stone. The flashlight still lay where I dropped it, beam pointing into the barrel. The water inside glowed faintly blue. Now not from reflection, but from within. I leaned over it, heart pounding. For a second I saw her face there. Mary's. Not young, not old. Just the way she looked the last morning she was alive. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear the words. Then the light went out. I staggered back, clutching my chest. The night pressed close again, thick and heavy. I wanted to run, but something kept me there. Something that felt like unfinished business. I took the letters from my coat pocket. The first one, edges curled from moisture, and the second, still damp with rain. I laid them side by side on the ground. The paper shimmered faintly in the dim light. The words seemed to breathe. I could almost see the ink moving, like it was alive again. "I forgive you, Bob. Please forgive yourself." The fire didn't destroy everything. Some things you have to face. I read them both until the words blurred. Then I said out loud, "I'm sorry, Mary. For everything." My voice cracked on the last word. That's when the wind changed. The fog lifted just a little, enough for me to see the far bank of the river. There, standing under a weeping willow, was a woman in a pale dress. Her outline shimmered like candlelight through glass. She didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there watching. I took one step forward. Mary, her head tilted slow. The wind carried the faintest whisper across the water, just one word, "home." Then she was gone. I dropped to my knees again, breath ragged. My hands pressed against the cold ground. And beneath my palms, I felt something solid wood. I brushed the mud aside and uncovered a small box, maybe the size of a book. The lid was carved with initials M.W. I froze. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were small pieces of charred paper. The ones I'd burned that night. And on top of them, perfectly preserved, a photograph, Mary holding a newborn baby, smiling through tears. Tucked into the corner was a folded slip of paper. I opened it. "You kept my heart, Bob. He kept your forgiveness." I stared at it until the rain blurred the ink. My pulse pounded in my ears. The wind carried the sound of a voice again, soft, childlike. "You can still come home." I looked up, and for just a second, I saw them both, Mary and the boy, standing side by side under the willow. The light around them glowed like dawn, breaking through fog. Then it faded. All that remained was the quiet rhythm of the river and the ticking of my watch, marking the moment I finally understood what forgiveness really sounded like. I sat there beside that river until morning came, watching the mist thin into sunlight. The first real light I'd seen in what felt like years. It brushed the tops of the trees, gold and soft, catching the steam rising from the ground. The small box lay open in front of me, the charred papers still inside. I touched them gently. They didn't crumble, even though they should have. The ink on some corners was still visible, tiny pieces of her handwriting that the fire hadn't won. I folded the note again and slipped it into my breast pocket. Then I lifted the photograph, the one of Mary and the baby. Her smile in it was so unguarded, so full of something I hadn't seen since before the arguments began. I whispered, "You kept this from me, didn't you?" The river answered only with its slow turning. Maybe she'd meant to show me this before that night. Maybe she'd already written the words she wanted me to find someday. And maybe I'd been too proud, too stubborn to listen. I picked up the box and stood. The world around me smelled like wet cedar and the faint sweetness of spring soil. I hadn't noticed that scent in years. When I reached the truck, the radio was already on, though I hadn't touched it. A slow hum drifted through the static, and then clear as memory, her voice, "You found what you were looking for." I froze with one hand on the door. What was I looking for? Mary. Silence, then a soft laugh, low, kind. "Not me. You." The dial clicked itself off. I sat there for a while, forehead resting against the steering wheel, breath coming in shallow waves. I wanted to believe it was over, that the ghosts had finally said what they needed. But something inside me still twisted tight. If Daniel was gone, if he was something I'd lost before life even began, then he'd been carrying my forgiveness all along. The part of me I'd refused to hold. I reached into my coat and pulled out the photograph again. The boy's eyes in it, those steady, patient eyes, looked like they'd been waiting for me to finally see him. So I whispered, "I see you now, son." The radio crackled softly like a sigh of relief. Then, faintly through the static, I heard a sound, two voices humming together, Mary and the boy. The same lullaby she used to hum when I couldn't sleep. I closed my eyes. The tune wrapped around me like warmth. When I opened them again, the mist had burned away, leaving the river clear and bright under the morning sunday. The willow on the far bank shimmered in that gold light, almost alive. I started the engine, ready to head home, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, something caught my eye. The seat beside me wasn't empty. A faint outline, just light and shadow, sat there, small hands folded in its lap. I didn't look away, didn't even breathe. The outline turned its head toward me, and though I couldn't see a face, I felt the peace in it. I said softly, "You can rest now." And as I drove away, the radio whispered one last time, barely audible through the hum of the tires and the ticking of my watch, "We already have." The drive back felt different this time. The same stretch of road, the same telephone poles and wet asphalt, but it didn't feel haunted anymore. The light had changed. Maybe I had too. The clouds were breaking apart into long bands of gold. The windshield caught the reflection, turning the truck's cabin warm and bright. I could still smell lavender faintly on my hands, like it had soaked into my skin. When I reached town, I stopped at the post office. Harold was there, sorting mail behind the counter, humming something off-key. He looked up and grinned when he saw me. "Well, I'll be," he said. "Didn't think I'd see you out this early, Bob." I smiled a little. "Had some things to deliver." He squinted. "Deliver? You mean receive?" "Not this time." I slid the 2 letters across the counter. They were dry now, edges curled like leaves. "I need to return these." He turned them over in his hands. "No postage, no address." "There's one," I said quietly. "Just not the kind you print." Harold chuckled, but when he looked up at me, something in my face must have stopped him. His expression softened. "You all right, Bob?" I nodded. "Yeah. I think I finally am." Outside, the air felt lighter. A few birds perched on the wires, shaking rain from their wings. I hadn't noticed birds in weeks. Maybe they'd always been there. I just hadn't looked up. I walked to the truck and sat behind the wheel. On the passenger seat where the photograph had been, there was something new. A folded page. Cream paper. Faint smell of lavender. My heart stumbled once. I unfolded it slowly. "Thank you for finding us. Keep listening. The world still speaks softly if you let it." M. Below her signature was a faint ring from a coffee cup, the kind she used to leave on every surface in the house. I laughed, quiet, shaky. It felt good. I looked out toward Main Street. The bakery was opening. The smell of fresh bread carried through the damp air. For a second, I saw the reflection of someone walking past the truck window, a young man in a worn jacket. Daniel. He didn't look at me this time, just nodded once and crossed the street. Sunlight caught the back of his hair, turning it the same chestnut brown as Mary's. Then he was gone, swallowed into the morning crowd. I sat there until my breath steadied. The ticking of my watch kept time with the hum of the world outside. No static, no voices. Just life, moving on. Still, before starting the engine, I turned the radio dial one last time. Static. Then a faint tune, almost lost in the hum. Her song again. Blue Moon of Kentucky. It played for only a few seconds before fading, but that was enough. It didn't scare me this time. It felt like a promise kept. I leaned back, whispering to the empty seat beside me. I'll keep listening. And somewhere deep in the static, I swear I heard her smile. When I got home, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It wasn't louder, just fuller, like the silence itself had changed shape. The morning light spilled through the kitchen window, landing on the spot where the first letter had appeared. The boards looked warmer now, less tired. I set my coffee down there, the steam rising slow and easy. The radio sat quiet on the counter. For the first time in days, it wasn't humming, clicking, or whispering my name. Just waiting. I ran my fingers over its old red casing, traced the scratches near the dial, the ones Mary used to tease me about when I'd try fixing it with a screwdriver instead of patience. I smiled. In the reflection of the window, I caught my own face, older. Yes, but not as hollow. The lines around my mouth had softened. My eyes didn't dart toward the door every time the floor creaked. I poured a second cup of coffee, set it across the table from me out of habit. Then I laughed under my breath. Old dog, I said. Still setting places for ghosts, but maybe ghosts deserved coffee too. I took out the photograph again, the one of Mary holding the baby, and pinned it to the corkboard above the table. It didn't hurt to look at anymore. It felt like a memory, finally sitting in its right place. The clock on the wall ticked steady. My watch matched it beat for beat. I decided to open the windows. The smell of rain-soaked grass drifted in, the kind of smell that makes you believe in beginnings again. I thought about everything that had happened, letters that shouldn't exist, voices through static, a boy who might have never been born. It would have sounded like madness to anyone else. But sitting there, I didn't need it to make sense. It felt true, and that was enough. Maybe forgiveness doesn't arrive like a clean slate. Maybe it's slower, something that sneaks in through small things. A photograph, a hum on the radio, the way sunlight lands on an old cup of coffee. I took a long sip and looked toward the garage. The truck was still there, a quiet giant under the window light. I hadn't driven it this much in years. I thought about the miles it had carried me, the good and the broken, and how maybe it deserved a new road too. The radio clicked suddenly. Just once. A soft pop. I turned toward it, waiting. Then her voice came through, faint but clear, as if she was sitting right beside me. You did good, Bob. I smiled. I finally listened. A warm hum filled the air like sunlight you could hear. I whispered, "Thank you." And then softer, "I forgive you too." The static faded into quiet. And this time, it stayed quiet. Not empty, but peaceful. I walked out to the porch. The rain clouds had broken open, revealing a sky as blue as memory. Across the yard, the old willow bent in the wind, its leaves shimmering like silver threads. I stood there for a long time, feeling the morning settle in. My watch ticked slow and certain. Somewhere in that sound, I could almost hear a heartbeat that wasn't just mine. That evening, the light fell soft and golden over the porch, the kind that makes everything look a little forgiven. I sat in my old chair with the second cup of coffee, still warm beside me, listening to the quiet hum of the world. The radio hadn't spoken all day. It just rested on the counter, its dial catching the sunset. For the first time since that first letter appeared, I didn't feel the need to turn it on. I didn't need proof anymore. The air smelled like pine and cooling rain. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then went quiet again. I closed my eyes and thought about Mary, the way her hair used to catch light, the sound of her laugh when she'd tease me about burning toast. I thought about the boy Daniel and how his eyes looked straight through the fog without fear. For years I'd been trying to fix things that weren't broken, trying to rebuild a moment that was already gone. But maybe some things aren't meant to be rebuilt. Maybe they're meant to be understood, then let go. I reached for the lighter on the table, the brass one she'd given me. RW still etched on the bottom. The hinge clicked smooth. I held it open, watching the flame sway. The same fire that once took her words now flickered gently, harmless, almost kind. I took out the small box from the river, still damp, still smelling faintly of earth, and set it on the porch rail. Inside, the charred papers lay quiet, their edges curled, but intact. I held one up to the light. The ink shimmered faintly where the fire hadn't reached. "I forgive you, Bob. Please forgive yourself." I read it aloud, the words steady this time. Then I blew out the lighter's flame. The wind carried the faintest echo of a voice through the open fields. Mary's laugh, then the soft hum of that old lullaby. I didn't cry. I just listened until it faded into the sound of the evening cicadas. The watch on my wrist ticked once, then stopped. Just one clean halt, like a sentence ending right where it should. I looked down, smiled. Maybe some moments aren't meant to be measured anymore. I leaned back. Let the last bit of sunlight rest on my face. The world felt wide again. The kind of quiet that doesn't ache. Inside the house, the radio clicked on by itself one final time. No static this time, just her song. "Blue Moon of Kentucky." It played soft, distant as the sky deepened from gold to blue. I listened to the last few notes drift out the window. When the song ended, there was only the hush of nightfall and the steady rhythm of rain starting again. I looked out toward the willow at the edge of the yard. For a moment I thought I saw them. Mary and the boy, hand in hand, bathed in the fading light. She turned once, that same soft smile, and then they were gone, folded into the dark, like a promise kept. I raised my cup toward the quiet yard. "Good night, you two." The porch light flickered once, then steadied. The rain came gentle and clean, tapping the roof, washing the world in silver. And in that stillness, I finally understood. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come from above or below. It comes from the space you clear inside yourself when you stop running from the truth. The kind of space where love can find its way home again.